Shall we, from a guy named Rob Goldstone to Donald Trump Jr. setting up the meeting? The Crown Prosecutor of Russia offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia and would be very useful to your father. He goes on to write, "This is obviously very high level and sensitive information, but is part of," this might as well be in all capital letters, "Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump." DJ TJ, Donald Trump Jr., replied to Goldstone minutes later, writing in part, quote, "If it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer." We have asked Jeremy Bash and Joyce Vance to return to our conversation for just one more bit. And Jeremy, just remind us the short list of facts versus myth, all dating back to this one fateful meeting.
One myth, Brian, was that it was just a meeting with Don Jr. No, in fact, it was a meeting with the entire senior high command of the Trump organization's campaign. It was a meeting with Don Jr., with Paul Manafort, the campaign chairman, and of course with Jared Kushner. Second myth is that this was just one lone lawyer coming to talk about adoptions. No, in fact, it was a Russian government delegation. That was how it was set up. It was a meeting with multiple players, all of whom have significant ties to the Russian government, and they came with a specific offer. Actually, they came to say that they intended to utilize the information that they had stolen through the cyber attacks. They were intended to weaponize it, and they intended to interfere and attack the 2016 election. And then the other myth is that it's, for some reason, because they didn't bring the documents to the meeting and they didn't actually do any specific collusion or conspiracy right there across the table, that somehow that wasn't conspiracy. Well, of course, that's not how it was set up. It was them coming on behalf of the Russian government to say, we're going to be doing this. In response, we want sanctions relief, which was, by the way, exactly what they ended up getting. And what happened next? Donald Trump mentioned those emails after they were released in October 150 times, on average of 5 times a day. It was a central part of his closing argument as part of the final 30 days of the presidential campaign.
And Joyce Vance, there again, we get to read the email from this Goldstone, who's kind of a Barney Rabulian character from overseas, laying out the stakes of the meeting. I know the feds have the equivalent of blinders and Bose headphones on in Mueller's office. What must they make, however, of these repeated and different attempts at cover stories for the meeting?
It's never good when you're always trying to come up with a cover story, and especially when the cover stories are all centered around this one meeting in Trump Tower. There's this sort of progressive truth-telling as the truth begins to come out. It really makes it look like there's something to hide about this meeting. But the reality, Brian, is there's not a lot to hide. The emails really tell the story. There's a federal law that makes it illegal for a foreigner to provide assistance to a United States campaign by means of a donation or a contribution. And that's pretty much the story that this email tells. It says not just a Russian citizen, but actually someone linked to the Crown Prosecutor wants to present dirt on Hillary Clinton as a donation to the Trump campaign. And 3 senior members of that campaign eagerly take that meeting. This is a lot less an email chain and more like a long-loading smoking gun. I think this is a very good piece of evidence for the Mueller team.
Jeremy, you have to love the Hollywood-inspired phrasing of taking a meeting, but when Giuliani says that anyone would have taken that meeting, what's your answer to that?
No way. I mean, I've worked on presidential campaigns. There's no way that you sit down with a foreign government delegation and they offer to attack the election, interfere, intercede, play a role, and then you just say, okay, we'll take it, and then you go ahead and act on it once they do that. That never happens. That's not normal. That's not just merely taking opposition research.
And Joyce, if you were the lawyer for Donald Jr., how much potential exposure would you be warning your client about exactly?
He has a lot of exposure here. It'll come down to his state of mind and his level of knowledge. But the emails in and of themselves are very important detail. And then we have the efforts to cover up the meeting. So it doesn't look great for him from this point of view. And I think one of the issues here, quite frankly, is whether or not prosecutors will view this as an independent act that they'll charge, because this particular statute is not frequently used. But this is a relatively egregious case involving not just a foreigner, but representatives of a foreign government itself.
Thanks to the two of you for sticking around, taking a few more questions. Sometimes our first segment is